Hi friends, my name is Emily and welcome back to my channel. Please excuse my voice. I currently have a sinus infection and chest infection and some lovely cracked ribs. So I sound bad to myself. I'm not sure how bad I'm gonna sound on camera, but if I do, forgive me. May was not a great reading month for me. So I finished reading 4 things and I started and put down 4 things. And I DNF'd a book. So I started off the month strong with a book that I actually liked. It's probably not my favorite book ever, but it is the best of the month, and that is Insomnia by Stephen King. So this I do have a full video on. I will link it down below or above if I remember. So this is the story of Ralph, who, following the death of his wife, develops insomnia and with the lack of sleep starts to see things, first auras and then little bald doctors. It's been a long time since I read a book by Stephen King from early on in his career. Like, I really enjoyed that about this. I feel like the things that I've read a lot recently just have a different feel, which is fair because this is several decades ago now. It's fair that King's style has developed and changed, but it's also kind of fun to come back to something that I feel very familiar with, because like I started with his earlier works. I started with Pet Sematary, actually. If you haven't read the Dark Tower series, this may not make a whole heck of a lot of sense to you. If you are reading the Dark Tower series right now and haven't read it, I would go ahead and pop it in chronologically in terms of publication. This came out in '94, so I think The Wastelands should be around this time. Yeah. The Wastelands came out in '91. That was the Dark Tower novel previous to this. So if you haven't read that, this might be something to consider reading, because this sort of plays with that, like, multiple universe, layers all connected kind of thing. Also, if you have read It, this is set in Derry, so that could be a fun connection as well. This is a book that rewards folks who have read a lot of King's bibliography. The next book I read was a piece of children's fiction, and it is Killer Style: How Fashion Has Injured, Maimed, and Murdered Throughout History. So this is by Serah-MaMcMahon and Allison Matthew David. I picked this up specifically because of Gillian Wilson, who does the illustrations. Wilson does the designs for the labels at one of my favorite breweries, and you're thinking, Emily, you can't drink beer because beer is liquid wheat. That's correct. I don't drink the beer there, but I love the atmosphere, so I actually have a sticker label for one of their cans because I love the art, and I would totally rep their merch. I'm not gonna rep it on the internet because, like, if we organically meet each other at this place, that's cool, but I don't want to advertise this as a location that I go to frequently. I love her illustrations. I love the bold colors and the black in them. So I picked this up because of the illustrations, but it's also just fun, weird facts about deadly fashion trends throughout history, some of which are pretty horrifying. Like, some of them are modern, like sandblasting jeans. Pretty recent. Radium was fun. When radium was discovered, it was marketed as a beauty product. So this company called Thoridia marketed its lipstick as a scientific beauty product and promised its toothpaste, powder, and soap would give customers a brighter smile and glowing complexion. Fucking literally. A lot of these women, like, there are a whole bunch of women who used radium to paint the numbers on clocks for military people. Like, the paint literally glowed. It was glowing paint. All of these girls ended up with radiation poisoning and had to be buried in lead coffins, and they are still radioactive today. And this was in 1914. Just fun facts in history. There were a lot of cheap knockoffs of, like, high-end products that were super flammable. Lead is a beauty product. Oh, another one. Okay. This I think is funny and horrifying at the same time, and I'm gonna share it with you. The hobble skirt. So there was this lady who was like, I'm gonna get in a plane, I'm gonna fly in a plane, but my skirt will blow in my face. I know how to fix that. So she grabbed a piece of rope and she tied it around her ankles so that her skirt wouldn't fly up, specifically for a plane ride. And people were like, oh, that's a nifty look. And so the hobble skirt came into fashion, and humans, women, because men weren't wearing hobble skirts, women literally died, like, getting trampled by horses, or like in crowds would get trampled because they couldn't move fast enough. Yeah, the hobble skirt. Now you know. So yeah, like, this is probably the highlight of the month, and I don't think either of these were 5 stars for me. Then I DNF'd a book, which is Speak by Laurie Halse Anderson. So I started this in preparation for Shout, which I read last month and talked about in my wrap-up, and I couldn't get into it, and I tried again this month, so I've decided to DNF it for now. One day I will come back to it, but there's no point in just leaving it sitting in this pile of books that's never moving, because I'm not picking it up right now. The next book that I read, I had my patrons vote on. Tier 3 of my patrons has the ability to vote, and I put up 2 books for them to vote between, just to create more polarizing results, and so it was between Frankenstein by Mary Shelley and We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. And so overwhelmingly the vote came in for Frankenstein. I read Frankenstein, and it was alright. This came off my TBR. It meets the challenge for a book published before the 20th century, I believe. It's heavy language. You're already familiar with the story just from existing as a human in the world. Like, every children's show around Halloween has a Frankenstein episode at some point. Almost every children's show, right? Like, it's a narrative that we're very familiar with. I don't have enough to say on it to make a full review. Like, there's really nothing that I can add. Just treat people nicely. Don't judge people based on how they look. One thing to take away from this. Oh, if you somehow have missed it, Frankenstein is the story of a young scientist named Victor Frankenstein who decides to play God, and so he takes a whole bunch of animal and body parts and he stitches them together and he brings them to life, and he's like, oh shit, what have I done? Abandon ship, and he leaves his creation alone in the world. And the creation watches a family, and it learns to speak, and it learns to think, and it's really smart and kind and sensitive, and then it goes to try and meet that family, and that family's like, monster, get away! And then its feelings are hurt, and it decides to take out its feelings by killing everything that Victor Frankenstein loves and ruining his life. The next book that I actually finished was East of Eden by John Steinbeck. So this is a piece of American literature. I would argue it's a sort of classic piece of American literature. In my Shop My Shelves video for May, this covers the 3 challenges, which is a classic, a deckled edge, and a son of a bitch that you've avoided because it's huge. I am coming to the conclusion that there is a certain period in American literature that I don't care for, like basically the American classics. There's a chunk of like white man authors that wrote American literature set in a certain period that I have no love for and no interest in. And so while I think this is a very interesting book, it's very well written, it's like 1,000,000 pages and it feels like 1,000,000 pages, I didn't enjoy it. And like, I can see things at work. I can see why you would teach this. I could see what you would pull out to teach to a class, but just as a reader for shits and giggles, it wasn't a good time. So this is a sort of intergenerational story about brothers and masculinity and families and money and the various ways that people can make money that are legitimate and not legitimate, and love, and I would say the power of names as well, trauma. And you would think that a lot of these things tick my boxes, like trauma, intergenerational relationships, sibling relationships. Just, it didn't. It didn't. And I'm disappointed because so many of these things, like hearing myself sort of nutshell East of Eden, should be a winner, but it wasn't. Those are the books that I actually read. I started and put down Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman. Another one of those American writers of a certain period that I just can't get into. I started Radicalized by Cory Doctorow for a book club. Have hated the first 3 short stories. There are 4 short stories. Started Nocturna by Maya Montaigne. This is a piece of YA that I was very much excited for. I don't like the protagonist, and so I'm having a hard time getting into it, but it sounds like it should be up my alley if I could just get over disliking the protagonist. And I started Again But Better by Christine Riccio, Riccio? How do you pronounce her name? I don't know. Ex-teen May on BookTube, and this reads like self-insert fan fiction. I have thoughts, but I haven't finished it. That brings us to the end of my May wrap-up, and overall, meh, reading month. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts on these books in the comments down below. I would love to hear from you guys. Before we go, we have to thank my patrons. Thank you, patrons, for making videos like this and other long-form content possible. Thank you for enabling me to buy the tripod to film the last Dark Tower video. Your support there, it's great, because tripods are not cheap, so I really appreciate that you enabled me to improve the quality of my content by purchasing upgraded pieces of equipment. So if you are interested in becoming a patron, links to that will be in the description box down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you soon. Bye.